actually gave this. Oh boy.
So, welcome to No Movies in Hell. I'm Chris Geiger.
I'm Lacroix Kris.
Today's episode is The Eternals.
Yay, we made it to episode 10.
Episode 10.
Yay.
So just a quick overview of Eternals. I was looking forward to this, but I think you were looking forward to it even more than I was.
I was very much looking forward to the new part of the MCU. And it happened, and I cannot wait to dive in.
I was looking forward to it as partially from the perspective of Don Lee being Gilgamesh and Gemma Chan. So they're heavily featured in this movie, major characters, as the person who runs the I Heart Korean Movies meetup. I made it an I Heart Korean Movie event, so I really was hoping that this movie did well and that these characters resonated with people, and I think that they did.
Yeah, I think it did really well. I think it might be the second highest grossing film, I guess right now, after Bond. But I know that Venom is doing very well too. But it's doing very well.
I'm surprised Venom is doing as well as it is.
I think it may be because it was right out the gate, and in terms of like a big blockbuster post, when theaters were able to actually let more people in under capacity or rules regarding capacity. So yeah,
it's still in theaters though.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, that's surprising. Okay, so let's get into it. I gave this movie very high ratings. You gave this movie very low ratings.
I did. I'm so curious to see. When you text me and you were like, I love this movie, I was like, I don't know if she's being facetious or if you actually mean this, because I know that you're not like a superhero person. And so I was like, oh, this is interesting. I cannot wait for us to chat. I did the eyes like.
So let me go ahead and pull up our rating sheet. So average score was just a 21.
Yeah.
I rated it a 3, meaning above average, not necessarily the best in the world, but above average in every category. And you rated it at or below average in every category, and most of them below.
I did. I would love to get your perspective. What categories? I mean, you gave it a perfect score, which I would never have thought that you would give this a perfect score. So I am so interested in hearing your take.
And this is the first movie I've given a perfect score to since we started this, and this is episode 10.
Yeah.
So let's start with the easy one, jewelry. I was not expecting a jewelry component, but then there are these magical bracelets that unite them to this super terrestrial being. And so, of course, 3. From a special effects perspective, I did think the special effects were amazing in this compared to even other Marvel or other superhero movies, which have high expectations to start with. But even above and beyond, because they were creating this other world, because they were creating several other worlds, not just this futuristic world or this outer space world, but they were going back in time and creating different eras of Earth. And that was interesting. I thought the soundtrack was great. Hair and makeup was good. You know, like the costumes were interesting from a superhero perspective, because most of the time when you have a superhero movie where they're all kind of the same, they all wear the same thing. But in this, there were nuances between them, and I think it's because they had different superpowers.
Right. I think their differentiation between their powers were definitely reflected in almost everything. The hair, the makeup, the jewelry, definitely the costumes. I loved, of course, Angelina Jolie as Thena and Salma Hayek as Ajak. Of course, they got, you know, their special touch, their signature looks, which I liked. I liked their signature looks. It's interesting. I felt as though there was a lot of star power in this film, and I love the representation. I think that, you know, these key characters, what like the Salma Hayek and Angelina Jolie, I think honestly they should have been reserved for like up and coming actors. Like I feel like a lot of attention is on the star power and not necessarily on, you know, these you see these characters as just characters, and you know they'll show up in other Marvel films and they'll continue on, but like in the last phase, you didn't know who Chris Hemsworth was. You really didn't know who Chris Evans was. You didn't know who Tom Hiddleston was. And now it's like solidified that that is Thor, that is Captain America, that is Loki. So I was like, oh, I felt like it was a little distracting, and not to spoil the end, but there's another like huge surprise that is appended to star power. And I just like, I just, it was a turn off for me because I felt like it was super saturated in with that respect. I guess another thing that really got under my skin was the cheap call out to DC. So there's a character, there's a part in the movie where Fastos' son says something to Icarus along the lines of, "Oh, you look like Superman." And it's like, that's the immediate red flag of like, you know, that that character is like bad or going to have some ill will appended to it because they immediately called out competitor in reference the, and I've never seen that before in a Marvel film. So I was like, oh, that's kind of a cheap shot. So I was like, oh, that sucks. And then I was like, oh man, like there's so many foreshadowing moments and like characters and kind of like the underlying hee hee ha ha of some of these characters coming back together after Game of Thrones. So you have a character named Cersei, and then you also have her boyfriend Dane, and then also her former partner Icarus. And it's like, oh, those guys were from Game of Thrones, where they also had to deal with another Cersei. And I was just like, oh, it's a wink, wink, nod, nod. And I felt like there was a lot going on, and it was a little hard for me to catch up with some of the subplots in the story. But, you know, overall, I think I'm looking forward to kind of the next phase in this, like what will happen afterward, especially towards the end. And maybe I'll revisit to see kind of like how things flow. But I felt like this was a really rocky start. You know, some of the story like was just a little nonsensical. Like they're not supposed to interfere with human to human like, you know, dealings, but they skip over a lot of inequality and a lot of things that with which they could fix or change, or, you know, in history. But then it was like it wouldn't matter anyway because there's a bigger force behind destroying everything to build up the energy for just a single entity. So I just felt like it was a lot going on.
Now, how much before going to see the movie did you know about the storyline?
I know absolutely nothing.
Okay, so is this an existing graphic novel that people could have read before they went?
I don't think there's a single graphic novel. I think that there are a few stories, and I think there are some changes too. Like, I believe there's a character, I'm not sure whom, in the film that actually is a male, and they made female. So I think even like Ajak may have been male and they made female, and they made Salma Hayek. I don't think that there was representation in the original comic book versus what we're seeing on TVs, or I'm sorry, in the theater. So Fastos probably didn't have a partner, or one of the other characters probably wasn't hard of hearing. So they made those changes to make it more inclusive. And I actually thought that was a really big bright spot in for this film.
I thought it was a little. I was glad to see the representation part of it, but I can also see how, in a population of 7, would you have 2 Asians, a little bit extreme, but
Yeah.
based on the overall casting historically in movies, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, this is good representation. How did Kumal Nanjiani's character, I think it's Kinga, how did he like not fight at the in the end? Like he was the only one where I was like, wait a minute, where did he go?
That's right. Actually, there were 3 Asians. I wasn't counting him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what'll happen. And there's also the extra, so there's like 2 spoilers. So it's like a mid-roll scene, and there is the end scene that was a bit of a spoiler for what will happen with Dane's character and like who he is in the MCU, which I didn't really know until I had like walked away and I was like, wait, what other films are coming out? And I was like, oh, that's why that person sound familiar.
Yeah, I had no idea what was happening there.
In fact, spoiler alert.
All right, tell me.
He is going to be a character in Blade. So that was Mahershala Ali's voice as Blade. And Dane is a character who uses a sword and garners strength from using the sword. I think his character is pegged to almost a villain. So it'll be interesting if Cersei's character still stays with him, or, if she goes back to Earth. I mean, I don't I don't know from the ending of that film.
That's true. They're it did seem a little bit final. They're parting.
I'm just so shocked that we have such a different perspective, because I was like, oh my gosh, Kris is probably not gonna like this film, even though there's some really awesome actors, and then I'm just blown away.
Well, that's the thing, because I don't have any background in Marvel lore, right? I don't know anything going in. So if you just tell me a good story for 2 hours, I'm happy. It doesn't have to make sense. I've already signed on for things not making sense. People have magical powers. I'm in. So now just tell me a story that makes sense within the context of these rules that we've set up. And I think that did this. And in fact, I really liked that there were a lot of subplots happening, and it made it more interesting, and it made the characters seem more realistic, if that's possible in a setting like this. So yeah, I really liked it. And I would even go see it again in the theater, maybe if I had more time. I said that about Dune too, and I still haven't been back to see Dune, but yeah, I thought it was great. So do you have anything to plug at the end of this episode?
So we still have POAP tokens available. So please, if you get the opportunity, it's probably best to download it using your web browser as opposed to your app, but check out our POAP, and we will have more information, and maybe we'll have a holiday POAP, because we got that coming up soon.
That's right. There'll be a holiday episode coming up soon. And remind me, you do not have to pay any gas fees when you mint your POAP. Is that right?
That is correct. POAP is completely free, no transaction fee or gas fee.
There you go. So if you are dipping your toes into the POAP world, this is a really low barrier to entry way to do it.
Indeed.
So that's it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.